It was a quiet evening, like any other, in the modest suburban home where David lived with his daughter, Emily. The neighborhood was peaceful, tucked away from the chaos of the city. David, a 40-year-old single father, cherished this calm. Life had thrown him enough curveballs in the past, and now, all he wanted was a stable and quiet life for his little girl. Emily, just 7 years old, had gone to bed a few hours ago. David sat in the living room, his eyes fixed on the flickering TV, but his mind was elsewhere. The soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional rustle of leaves outside were the only sounds breaking the silence. He liked these peaceful nights, just him, the quiet house, and his daughter sleeping safely upstairs. Suddenly, his phone buzzed on the coffee table. The sound was so unexpected that it made him jump. He grabbed it quickly, thinking it might be important, only to see that it was Emily's number. Confusion washed over him. His daughter was upstairs, asleep. He had tucked her in himself. His first thought was that she must have accidentally called him in her sleep. Kids did strange things sometimes. But the curiosity tugged at him, so he answered. "Hello?" There was a pause on the other end, followed by the soft, familiar voice of his daughter. "Dad, come upstairs." David frowned. His pulse quickened slightly. Was Emily playing a game? The sound of her voice was unmistakable, but there was something off about it. A strange flatness. He stood up, glancing at the staircase that led to Emily's room. "Emily?" he called out, but there was no response. The house felt eerily still. Shaking off the discomfort, he went upstairs to check on her. He opened her bedroom door gently, peeking in. Emily was curled up in her blankets, fast asleep, breathing softly. Her phone lay on the nightstand, untouched. David let out a small sigh of relief. Maybe he was just overthinking it. She must have called by accident somehow. Returning downstairs, he resumed watching TV, but the unsettling feeling lingered. His eyes kept darting to his phone, half expecting it to buzz again. The minutes passed slowly, the house growing colder and more oppressive with each second. Then, his phone rang again. David's heart skipped a beat. He stared at the screen, and there it was, Emily's number flashing again. His hand trembled slightly as he answered. "Hello?" This time, the voice was more insistent. "Dad, come upstairs." "I'm waiting." A cold chill ran down his spine. Something wasn't right. He stood up, pacing the living room, glancing toward the kitchen and then back toward the stairs. Emily was asleep. She hadn't moved. He hurried back upstairs, his feet heavy against the wooden steps. Bursting into Emily's room again, he found her in the same position, peacefully sleeping. "Emily?" he whispered, shaking her gently. She stirred, her eyes fluttering open. What is it, Daddy?" she asked groggily. David swallowed, kneeling beside her bed. "Have you been calling me?" She blinked up at him, confusion clouding her tired eyes. "No. I'm sleepy." David felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. "Okay, sweetheart, go back to sleep." He kissed her forehead and slowly backed out of the room. His mind was racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. It couldn't be her. Someone must be messing with him. But who? As he descended the stairs, his phone buzzed again. He stopped midway, his breath catching in his throat. Emily's number again. This time, the voice on the other end was barely a whisper. "Come upstairs, Dad. Please." David's legs felt like they were glued to the stairs. His heart pounded loudly in his chest. "Who is this?" he demanded, his voice trembling. But there was no response, just a faint sound of breathing before the line went dead. He rushed back to the living room, his mind spinning. Could someone have broken into the house? Could someone be using Emily's phone to lure him into a trap? The thought was horrifying, but it was the only explanation that made sense. He grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and began searching the house, starting with the living room and kitchen. Every shadow seemed darker, every corner more sinister than it had ever been before. David moved to the back door, checking the locks. They were secure. He checked the windows, no signs of forced entry. But the eerie feeling wouldn't leave him. The house, once his sanctuary, now felt like a maze of unknown dangers. As he circled back into the living room, his phone rang again. This time, his hand shook so violently that he almost dropped it. Emily's number appeared once more. "I'm outside now, Dad," the voice said. "Come outside." David's blood ran cold. His eyes darted to the windows, the curtains drawn tight. His hand clenched the phone as he slowly approached the front door, his heart pounding in his ears. He opened the door a crack and peered out. The front yard was bathed in pale moonlight, the street eerily quiet. No one was there. He stepped outside cautiously, looking around. His eyes scanned the empty street, the shadows of the trees swaying gently in the wind. Nothing moved. And then, his phone buzzed in his hand once more. The message made his heart stop. "She's not alone in the house." Panic surged through David's veins. He turned and bolted back inside, his mind screaming at him to get to Emily. His footsteps thundered up the stairs, two at a time, until he reached her door. Bursting into her room, he froze. Emily was sitting up in bed, her eyes wide with terror, her lips quivering. "Daddy, there's someone in my room," she whispered. David's stomach dropped as his eyes scanned the dimly lit room. And then he saw it. In the corner, behind the open closet door, a figure shifted ever so slightly. For a moment, time stood still. David's breath hitched in his throat, his body frozen in place. The figure stepped forward, slowly revealing itself, a man, dressed in dark clothing, his face obscured by the shadows. "Get away from my daughter!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the stillness. But the voice only laughed again, a sound that was both mocking and sinister. "She's mine now. You let me in when you weren't watching." In that moment, David realized it wasn't just the intruder who had tried to harm his daughter. It was something far more sinister, something supernatural that had taken root in their home. Emily was sitting up in bed, her eyes wide, but they were not the warm, innocent eyes he knew. They glowed with an unnatural light, reflecting a malevolent force. Shadows curled around her, twisting and shifting like dark smoke, enveloping her in a shroud of darkness. "Daddy!" she cried, but it wasn't her voice. It was layered with whispers, echoing through the air like a choir of lost souls. "Help me!" David felt his heart clench with terror. He lunged forward, reaching for Emily, but the darkness surged, pushing him back. "Stay away!" the voice snarled, a cacophony of hisses and laughter mingling with his daughter's cries. "Let her go!" he shouted, desperation clawing at his throat. The shadows flickered and pulsed, and he could feel an ancient presence rising within them. It wasn't just an entity, it was a dark force, feeding off the fear it created. David's instincts screamed at him to run, but he couldn't leave Emily. He remembered the stories his grandmother had told him as a child about spirits who thrived on fear, who would take on the forms of loved ones to lure people in. The idea of a malevolent spirit using Emily's likeness sent a wave of determination through him. "Whatever you are, I won't let you take her!" David shouted, his voice firm. He stepped closer, drawing on every ounce of courage he had. "Emily, fight it! You're stronger than this!" The shadows flickered, and the glowing eyes narrowed as if trying to resist. "She's mine!" the voice screeched, a shriek that vibrated through the air, causing the walls to tremble. "No! She's my daughter!" David pressed on, tears brimming in his eyes as he fought to push past the darkness. "You can't have her!" He reached out again, this time focusing on the love he felt for Emily, the countless memories, the laughter they shared, the warmth of her small hand in his. It was a bond forged in joy, and he poured all of that energy into his words. "Emily, you are loved! Remember who you are. You're brave, you're kind, and you can overcome this." With that, the shadows writhed violently, releasing a loud roar that filled the room. The dark energy began to pull back, retreating from David's presence, inching away from the light of love that he radiated for his daughter. "Daddy!" Emily cried again, her voice breaking through the distortion. "Help me! I'm here, Emily! I'm right here!" he yelled, moving closer, his heart racing. He could see her now, the light in her eyes breaking through the darkness as she fought back against the shadows. With one final surge, David grasped Emily's hands, and the shadows recoiled, screeching in fury. Together, they stood strong, David's determination entwined with Emily's spirit, and with one powerful command, he shouted, "Leave her alone!" The darkness erupted, swirling wildly before collapsing in on itself, a tempest of rage and sorrow. The air grew warmer, the oppressive weight lifting as the malevolent spirit shrieked and vanished into the corners of the room, dissolving like smoke in the morning sun. As the final echoes faded, the room returned to stillness, the warm light of the moon spilling in through the window. David looked down at Emily, who was now back to herself, her wide eyes filled with fear but also relief. "Daddy?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm here, Emily," he said, pulling her into his arms, feeling her warmth against him. "You're safe. You're home." The warmth of their embrace felt like a protective shield against the darkness that had threatened to tear them apart. David held her tightly, knowing that they had faced something unimaginable and come out stronger. The next morning, the sun rose brightly, illuminating the remnants of the night's terror. David and Emily sat on the porch, the normalcy of their surroundings slowly returning. The shadows of the previous night felt like a distant memory, but David knew he would never take their safety for granted again. "Can we play outside, Dad?" Emily asked, her voice bright and cheerful. David smiled, the warmth of the sun bathing them both in golden light. "Of course, sweetheart. Let's enjoy this day together." As they stepped outside, David felt a renewed sense of determination. The darkness might have tested them, but it had also strengthened their bond. They would face whatever came next together. And as they played in the warm sunlight, he knew that love, indeed, was the strongest force of all. No darkness could overcome it, not now, not ever.